Okay, so the next section of this chapter is about core issues in sport pricing. First thing is we want to look at this idea of the fan cost index. And this is more specifically in the sport industry. We know that in most goods or services, basically if you purchase the product that's being offered, for the most part, what you're paying for is what you get. In other words, there's not any necessarily hidden costs. Now, there's obviously examples where you have hidden fees or fees that go along with it, or you're buying product extensions, and so that cost more money. But what I'm talking about here is in the sport industry, we typically have additional costs that go along with attending sporting events. So, for example, somebody might buy a $30 ticket to a game, but that's not the final cost for the fan. You have to think about the entire fan cost index, and that is the cost of the gas to get to the game, or public transit, depending on where you live. The parking, if you are parking a vehicle at the facility. Any food, either before, during, or after the game, and concession stands. If you have kids and you're sending to the kids zone and they buy tickets to go play the games, or you buy merchandise, or you buy a hot dog, or you buy a soda, or whatever it is, all of these things come together, and the culmination of all of them is the fan cost index. And so when you think about what we just talked about in the foundations of pricing, that value and cost and price and value are the number one and number two reasons or ways people make decisions, we have to understand that the entire cost of attending an event is what we have to consider. It's not just the price of the ticket itself. Another thing we have to be concerned with is this idea of the value-price relationship. Many times people assume, especially when you don't know much about the product, that price is an indication of the quality or the value that you're getting. So people go, well, if it's a high-priced item, then I expect there to be a high-quality product. And that's a reasonable assumption. We understand that through a lot of different pricing theories. This is especially true, like I said, if we don't know anything about the product. The first thing people look at is, okay, I need to buy this new, running shoe for my kid. I've never bought one like this before. What do you immediately go to? Well, I don't know how much I would like to spend, so I go to the section or to the price points that most fit that, whether I'm buying a high price item, so I want the best quality, or I'm just trying to find something that is relatively inexpensive, and so I go with that. And so many times product values come from this price, and we know that value is typically an indication of quality, the convenience, the aesthetics of the product that's being purchased, the cleanliness, the comfort, security, the availability, or the durability that come from buying that product. Another term or core issue, especially in sporting events, it occurs in other entertainment entities as well, or industries as well, but that's price discrimination, and it sounds exactly like it is. You are discriminating through price against different consumer groups. So certain characteristics about people you will charge more or less for. And you might say, well, that's not right. Most of the time when you see price discrimination, you're actually giving discounts to individuals that fall within a certain product category. The most common type of price discrimination that we see is third-degree price discrimination. I'm not going to go through the first and second, but pretty much just talk about this third-degree price discrimination. You might give a different discount if you went to a movie theater for a college student, or if you went to a baseball game and they gave you a discount because you're a active duty military member, or if you get the senior discount when you go into a local sporting event. All of those things are charging different prices for these consumers, but really charging higher prices for the main consumer group, the majority of people. Well, why do we as a society believe it's okay to charge different prices for these people? Think about these consumer groups. Most of them are at a disadvantage in some form or fashion, or we want to honor them. So, for example, our society as a whole is proud of our military, and so we give them discounts. Our society, we know as a whole, people who are seniors, typically, especially if they've retired, are living on fixed incomes, and many of them living off of Social Security. And so we're trying to give discounts to things so that we can reward them for the efforts they've had. Or the college student. Many people know that college students are trying to get a degree, don't typically have the funds or the spending power to do a lot of things, but they still want them to come in their facility, and so they're offering them a cheaper price. So raising or lowering price based on a group Take, for example, athletic events at colleges. Alumni will pay a lot more for their tickets because they're working adults usually that have jobs and they want to give back to the university, while students typically get cheaper prices. At SFA, this is one of the few schools in large enough schools in Texas where you go to sporting events for free, and that is a form of price discrimination. People don't typically have a problem with it because of, like I just said, spending power. All right, so what are some factors? There are 8 factors that affect how prices are set. First one is situational factors. These are things that may not normally occur on a regular basis or will occur only over a short period of time. For example, building of facilities. Typically, sport organizations in today's professional sports are building facilities using PSLs or per seat licensing. Essentially, what you are doing when you buy a season ticket, let's say for AT&T Stadium in Dallas for the Dallas Cowboys, you're buying a season ticket that cost is, I'm making this up, $100 for your ticket. You are required to pay a price that is above and beyond that in order to have the right to buy that ticket. So you may pay $100 per ticket for, let's say you have a 4-game package, that's $400. And in that 4-game package, in order to buy that 4-game package, you have to pay $1,000 up front. So it's really $1,400, and $1,000 of that is a per seat license. Typically, this is only used for full seasons. I was just giving that example. The reason they do this is they're trying to, specifically in AT&T Stadium and most sport facilities, is to finance the building of the facility or a remodel. Another example of a situational factor is team performance. Team wins, demand goes up. Team loses, demand goes down. And so what do we do with price if we're in an elastic demand curve? Obviously, we've talked about that. We see that teams sometimes raise and lower prices based on demand and how they may behave. Now, you have to understand that, well, if an organization decides to raise prices because there's a greater demand, because they continue to win, it's not always recommended. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it works. The problem is what happens when you stop winning and you've raised prices. The expectations, again, just talked about value-price relationship. We expect to have a high-quality product if we're paying a high price. And so now you start to have issues with your consumer's perception of your brand. But sometimes it does work out. And then obviously losing causes price promotions, and this would be offering discounts. The second factor is cost, and this is the cost to the manufacturer or to the producer. And so there are costs such as the marketing of goods, which is a primary cost would be manufacturing or purchasing of goods from the supplier. So raw materials. So let's say that I'm producing baseballs, and the leather that is the material that binds it all together, the raw material good goes up because of tariffs between countries or limited resources in a country or whatever it may be. Then we know that the cost will go up for those baseballs. Well, we know through a theory called distributive justice that consumers believe that a firm has a right to a fair profit. At the same time, a consumer has a right to a fair price. And so if costs go up in salary cost, that's the big question about minimum wage. Minimum wage goes up, somebody's going to have to pay for that. And many businesses are saying we're just going to turn around and charge more money for the products that we produce so that we can continue to make a profit. Without having this whole debate about whether minimum wage is good or bad, that's one of the arguments is that, well, if cost goes up, then we're going to have to raise prices. And so the whole thing I'm trying to get at is cost will influence the price because organizations need to make money. The third one is competition. So consumers often search for products and make decisions based on price. And take, for example, the secondary ticket market. The reason why people go to the secondary ticket market is one of 2 reasons. Most of the time, they're going to try to find a cheaper ticket, try to buy a ticket from somebody who's really just trying to get out from underneath their season ticket. They can't make it to that game. They paid $20 for it. They'll sell it to you for $10. Get some of their money back. You're looking for a discounted price. And so in this circumstance, we might look at this as competition with the primary market, in that the team's trying to sell additional tickets. They've already sold that ticket for $20. They want to sell you ticket for $20, but you're going to try to find a discounted price. And so we're looking for different prices. So that's an example of competition. The fourth one is supply and demand. So if our supply exceeds our demand, then we typically have a surplus, and in that what we have to do is typically decrease our prices for those surplus items, or we'll talk about it in a minute, we'll add it in a price bundle. But if our demand exceeds our supply, then we have a shortage, and our prices either tend to increase or stay the same. But typically, if your demand is there and your supply is not, you could increase the price to the point where demand is equal or you find that equilibrium point. The fifth one is marketing objectives. This kind of goes back to our value-price relationship discussion a minute ago. But if we're trying to show that we're a prestigious product and we want to charge prices to indicate that, or I want to show quality through inexpensive or low prices, a lot of it goes back to our marketing objectives. Are we trying to be seen as family friendly? If so, price is a big part of the cost of going to a game. Legal considerations is our sixth one. These will be regulations that help or affect our price setting flexibility. If we're producing, for example, goods overseas and we're importing them and there's a tariff on that, or a complete embargo on our ability to find raw goods to produce our goods. The utility companies increasing prices we don't have a lot of control over, but legal considerations do. And then any laws that may prevent ticket scalping, specifically in the secondary ticket market. The seventh factor is consumers' perceptions. Kind of goes back to our marketing objectives, but really we have to understand that perception is reality in marketing. In many ways, if a consumer thinks our price is too high, and the majority of our consumers think that it's too high, even though you may say this is relatively inexpensive, perception is reality. They think it's too high, then they think it's too high. And you have to do other things, either increase the perceived benefit, going back to the satisfaction and the value equation, or reduce prices. And so consumers' perceptions have a big part to play in how we look at prices and the acceptability of prices. The last one is the marketing mix consistencies. And so if my target market wants a specific product and to them quickly, and the messages we're sending is a high quality or high prestige, then our price needs to match all of those statements. If we're seen as being family friendly in the products we produce and how we get it to our consumers, the facility itself, or the messages we're sending are being family friendly, then we need to reflect that in the prices we set. Okay, so the last part of this video deals with the standard approaches to pricing. These are the things that you can take with you as you go. We're going to start very basic and move on to some things that are less basic. The first one is break-even analysis. This is typically used by organizations that are nonprofits. The essential part of this, which leads into our next few pricing approaches, is you need to understand your total cost. The total cost equation is on your screen. It is your fixed cost plus your variable cost, and your variable costs are multiplied by the units that you produce. So what are fixed costs? Fixed costs are those things that typically don't change within a year or even multiple years. So rental costs, taxes, office equipment, those types of things. Your variable costs do change, and typically they change by the units that you're producing. So the wages, for example, let's say I have a 15,000 seat arena. On a typical Monday night, I can bring in 6,000 people, but on a Friday night, I can bring in 13,000. You have to hire more people on your Friday night to be able to serve the additional thousands of people that you're bringing in. And so wages could change based on the units you're producing. In this circumstance, the number of people you're allowing in your facility. Same thing if I'm producing hats. If I'm producing hats and I buy materials in bulk, cost would be increased the more I buy them, the more cost I have, more people have to hire, and so on and so forth. And so variable costs are changed by the units were produced. So here's the example of soccer balls. If I know my fixed cost is $100,000, I know for every soccer ball that I produce, it's going to cost me $11.50. I know $11.50. I know my projected demand for the soccer balls is 4,000. I multiply $11.50 times 4,000. I get 46,000. I add that to $100,000 fixed cost. I know that I have $146,000 of total cost. So now we understand total cost. We have to then divide it by the number of units we're selling. And so $146,000 divided by the 4,000 that I think are demanded based on my sales forecast, then I know I need to charge $36.50 per soccer ball to cover my fixed and variable costs. That is our total cost. We use this again in nonprofits because we don't want to make a profit, but at the same time we need to cover our cost. The next step to that is, or step up, is our cost plus. This is similar, actually almost exactly the same as a break even. You have to understand what your break even is first, and then you add a desired profit. Now this is different than market pricing, which I'll show you in a second. But cost plus pricing is a specific dollar figure added on top of the break even analysis. So for example, let's say I'm doing a fitness center. I know that I will have, or I project that I'll have 900 members. If my total cost, which is my fixed plus my variable times my 900 projected members, is $500,000, and my ownership comes to me and says, I want a $100,000 profit this year, I add those together. My cost plus point is $600,000. I divide $600,000 divided by 900 projected members. I come up with $666 per member per year. You create a membership package that would equal that per member. That's how you get to your cost plus. It's very basic. There are a lot of moving parts that would change this, but we're trying to stay very specific that when you leave here after graduation, you can at least know what a cost plus pricing mechanism is. Now I mentioned this a second ago. Markup pricing. Again, very similar to break even and cost plus, except in this circumstance, you're adding a percentage over your break-even analysis. Commonly used in the retail industry, you see markups on clothing, as well as sometimes is used in the food industry. What's your markup on the cost it takes? The whole purpose in this is that a markup pricing is a percentage. So here's an example of a tennis shoe. You can see that it's sold by Adidas for $90. Let's say that's their final price. How did they get to that? Well, let's say their total cost was $45, and they want to make a 100% markup on that. They may charge $90 for it. So a 100% markup on a $45 total cost would be $90, and that's probably low markup. They probably do a lot more than that. But the last thing I want to talk about in the standard approach, as I mentioned it a second ago, is product bundling. Essentially, it's taking those products that are typically sold less, or those, when I was talking about the surplus, you may have products that are on your shelves that you need to get rid of. You may package it with other products that are more popular. So, for example, if a university creates, let's say at Texas A&M where I went, they had a multi-sport pass. Everybody wanted to go to two sports, football and men's basketball. So what did they do? Well, they had one package that was football only. You paid something like $300 for the season. Or you could pay $340 or something like that and have every sport, not just football. And so that included men's basketball, women's basketball, tennis, baseball, softball, soccer, all of their sports for only $40 more. Well, what are they trying to do? They know that the attendance at the soccer matches and the tennis matches are not as great or as high demand, but they still need the additional revenue to help support those programs. They know everybody wants football and a few people want basketball, and so they do the multi-sport pass that charge a little more. So again, those things we have surplus, we try to add to those things that are higher demand. Sponsorship packages do the same thing. I might have an outfield sign that I can't sell, but I know that, or it's harder to sell, but I know a sponsor may be willing to get a discount on a Jumbotron ad, and so I try to package them together to sell it. Same thing in parking passes and club areas and tickets. I might buy a season ticket package that gives me access to a club area that I may go to 1 or 2 times. The team knows that, but they're trying to get additional revenue. Same thing if you buy a parking pass. It's $5, let's say $5 every time you go. Well, you could pay up front and they were $3 per every game that you have a ticket. Well, if you don't attend most of the games, the team's now got guaranteed revenue that they would not have gotten if they didn't get you to buy the parking pass. And so product bundling, again, is offering multiple goods and selling them as one, typically with the big ticket item being what people want, and then adding other elements that would be supplemental or surplus items.